Welcome to the Nagrik Podcast with Hari. You said that in fossil fuels, the major factor is, of course, electricity generation. The second is transportation, and the third is heating for heat purposes. Let's probably, sort of go into the rabbit hole of all these different factors and try to understand what the world is doing, so that people are able to comprehensively understand that all the existing problems have a solution set that's being developed by the world, right?
There's a lot happening, to be honest. Our scientists, technologists, policymakers, financiers, entrepreneurs, they're all they've rolled up their sleeves and are working. So if you look at energy per se, right, there's a whole move towards renewable energy. That's how you see these solar panels popping up everywhere and windmills coming up everywhere. So the transition is happening. And if I was to guess, I think probably we are already at around 20% or so of renewable energy globally.
Electricity generation, 20% of that is coming from the renewables. Right. Interesting.
But there are challenges. The sun doesn't shine all the time and the wind doesn't blow all the time. So the demand and supply are not matching, right? So therefore, you're now looking at storage technologies so that when renewables are producing, but there's not much avenue to use that energy, you start storing it to be able to use in energy lean, or production lean periods, right? So that's really going on. You need to kind of enhance and smarten the grid also, because it becomes very complex when you're adding too many sources of energy production and too many endpoints that are using it. So I won't go into the details, but I'd like to mention that useful as they are, solar and wind, they have their limitations. One I mentioned in terms of the match of supply and demand. Also, they create a lot of waste, right? And we need to see that waste has a carbon footprint as well. Now, how do we handle it? And looking at the way global energy needs are increasing, because our life is becoming more and more comfortable. Everything is getting automated, all that needs energy. And if I was to just kind of think, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, how do we meet the kind of energy demand? My own thinking is that we will need to explore other sources of energy. And if we want something clean, we should not give up on nuclear, right? So nuclear has been a bad word so far, because especially after the Fukushima, this thing. But there are some people who've been silently working on it. Bill Gates is one of them, who've been trying to make it cheaper and safer, right? This, I'm talking about the nuclear fission, right? But even if we make it cheaper, safer, nuclear fission has inherent issue. And the issue is that it can spark a chain reaction. And if it does spark a chain reaction, you can't control it and disasters can follow. Well, they're trying to address that by having small modular units and stuff like that. And I think we'll make some breakthrough in that. But what I wanted to kind of also talk to you about is a new avatar of nuclear, which is nuclear fusion, right, which is coming up. It's been in the research labs for multiple decades. And hopefully in the next decade or so, we should see it kind of making its contributions. Nuclear fission is when you have an atom and you break it up, and as you break it up, it releases energy. Nuclear fusion is the opposite. There are two atoms, you combine them, and when you combine them, the combined atom releases energy, because the mass of the combined atom is lesser than the two atoms. So E is equal to mc square, plays a role there. Now, nuclear fusion is how sun generates its energy. So basically what we're trying to do is mimic that, right? And 2 years back at the Livermore Berkeley Institute, they experimented, and for the first time there was a positive experiment done wherein the amount of energy required to fuse or bring the two atoms together was less than the amount of energy the the fused item released, right? Which was very positive and very encouraging, which shows that we are on the right path. So I do hope and believe that we are able to get nuclear power into commercial production because it doesn't have the inherent disadvantage of nuclear fission, which means that it cannot go on to a chain reaction and be destructive because you can always stop the fusion, the supply of the atoms to stop the reaction. Yeah.
Interesting. So you're saying that, let's say, in terms of the overall landscape, we have solar, wind, nuclear fission is already active. It has its own, set of problems like cost, but the main thing is the safety concern, especially when we, saw the event in Japan in probably around 2011 or something, 2011. And then you're saying that the new technology, which is fusion, is something. And I think we also saw recent news coming from China, if I'm not wrong, a few days back, where I think they were able to sustain some reaction for I think just a few days back, 15, 20 minutes. But yeah, it was something to that tune. So again, I think over the last few weeks, very interesting announcements have been coming out of China in terms of, let's say, energy, AI, and so on and so forth. Right?
There are many other sources of energy. There's geothermal, there's tidal wave, there's many others. But you got to see what you can scale, with minimal disturbance to the nature.
Right. But any particular reason, like just doubling down on the fusion bit, any particular reason why the development or let's say the commercialization of this technology is taking so much time? I mean, fission has been going on, from the 60s or 70s. So why hasn't fusion been commercialized yet?
See, when you're bringing atoms together, for example, when it happens in the sun, the temperature would be 100 million degrees centigrade. The pressure would be 1 billion units, let's say. So what you do is you take the two atoms, and for fusing them, you got to kind of bring them into a plasma state, right? Through this high temperature and high pressure. And it's very difficult to retain that plasma stage. Right now, to my best knowledge, it's been done only for seconds.
Right. And I think that's what happened in China. I think they were able to sustain this plasma state for about 18 minutes or something. So maybe step in that. Okay.
And how do you do it? Because if you're going to use more energy to fuse, then it's no point. So that's what kind of our scientists and technologists are working on. It's a very, very complex thing to achieve. Yeah.
Interesting. So again, technological complexity of, let's say, being able to generate that high a temperature and maintain that pressure is the...
And then how do you convert it into power? Because if the fused this thing comes in contact with the surface, the heat is lost. So you have to kind of maintain it in isolation and then convert it into power. So yeah.
Cool. So I think we talked about electricity. So I think there's definitely a lot of hope that, let's say, even beyond solar, wind, and the fission things, we have new technologies coming up, and then of course the edge cases of geothermal and so on. But they will never, I'm assuming, take the lion's share of electricity generation ever. But not sure.
Never say no, but at the moment, that's how it looks like. Yeah.